Hey investor friends, I'm Michelle Markey, and I know markets have been reacting a little bit to the Fed signaling that they may be raising interest rates a little sooner than they or the markets expected. So I know there's been a little bit of a tumble lately, but to me that's small potatoes compared to what I think could be coming in the medium-term future. And since it's the beginning of summer, I'm pretty sure he's helping himself to some ice cream, and I'm gonna do the same. And then I'm also gonna talk about some of what my favorite guru investors have been up to in the earlier part of 2021 based on 13F filings, that Data Roma report. So a lot of what they've been doing is only reflecting their activity from January through March 2021. But I'll go through some of what I've observed at a high level, as well as also talk about my wish list of stocks and what some super investors, and on the Data Roma list there's 72 super investors that they track, how much activity there's been on my wish list. So I hope you enjoy. And if you also enjoy studying and emulating the goats of investing, I'd love if you could please smash that like button and please subscribe, because it greatly helps out with the YouTube algorithm and I greatly appreciate it. Thanks. I really enjoy and appreciate how Data Roma has compiled 13F filings from a bunch of super investors, 72 of them to be exact, that they track. And of these, I really paid the most attention to my favorite four, which are Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, Mohnish Pabrai, and Spier. And Data Roma also points out cool, interesting activities such as the most owned stocks or last quarterly buys or the top big bets. And all of that's kind of useful to see if there are some new companies that we could check out to see if we might want to invest in them too, or if we are capable of growing our circle of competence in some of these industries and companies that super investors are buying, so that maybe they're also a good idea for us as retail investors to own as well. Starting with Berkshire Hathaway's Q1 2021 activities, I see that Buffett, who is the CEO and chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, he's like the Batman managing this portfolio, and he's got Todd and Ted, who are like Robin, being his sidekicks and also buying some smaller positions. And so primarily I want to look at some of Buffett's top holdings to see what did he do in that first quarter this year, and whether that makes me want to do anything or kind of just observe it and not really do much right now. And I noticed that he increased his position among his top 10 holdings in Verizon, and he reduced his positions in US Bancorp and General Motors. So with all of that in mind, it doesn't really inspire me to do much, and clearly I know that Buffett's sitting in over $140 billion of cash and not really buying much, if anything at all. I mean, maybe he's doing some stock buybacks, which I'll get a little bit into later, but from what his current activities are so far, it doesn't seem like he's really that active in buying or selling much of anything lately. In the past couple of months, the biggest news in the value investing world came from none other than Charlie Munger, the chairman of Daily Journal Corporation, or also known as DJCO, and he lit up the news because he bought a stake in Alibaba on behalf of DJCO, and he hasn't taken much action in this professional portfolio for years, going back to the end of 2014 when he reduced DJCO's position in POSCO. And so it's been 6 years since he acted on behalf of DJCO to buy anything. So he bought a stake in Alibaba, in saying that it's better to have a holding in that than in US Treasury bonds right now. And he says that because he considers Alibaba as a common stock to have good prospects long term. So I feel like that's a pretty bullish sign coming from Charlie, who buys almost nothing because he's affectionately known as the abominable no man. And this leads us to looking at what Mohnish Pabrai's portfolio has been up to. And maybe he bought a position in Alibaba before Charlie Munger did, but we found out first of what Charlie bought because DJCO's 13F filing came out sooner than Pabrai's fund 13F filing came out. So that's why we know that both of them actually bought Alibaba. And from what I can tell, Mohnish Pabrai has been only buying Alibaba and reducing his stake in Micron Technology. It's not really clear to me if he's been reducing his Seritage holding. And I could go to the real source of the 13F filing to really see what he's been up to with Seritage, but I don't really know that much about his other two holdings. I've been doing a lot more research and looking into Alibaba, and feel free to check out my video where I start exploring what that company is about and where I think the margin of safety price could be for that company. But moving on to Guy Spier's Aquamarine Capital Fund, I noticed that he didn't buy or sell anything in Q1 of 2021, and his latest activity involved him adding to his Micron technology position in Q4 2020 and then selling all of what used to be known as Fiat Chrysler before it merged with Peugeot in the winter of 2021, and then that became known as Stellantis. So I noticed that both Guy Spier and Mohnish Pabrai got rid of their entire Fiat Chrysler, and they may be trying to find other good cash flow producing businesses. I'd like to share an example wish list of stocks I'd like to buy when these companies might go on sale. And some of these companies I own already and others I'd still like to buy. And I have a bigger wish list of more companies I'd like to buy, but for the sake of this video, I'll just point out these 6, and they include Berkshire, Starbucks, Costco, Apple, Visa, and Alibaba. And you can see that some of my favorite investors, Buffett, Munger, and Pabrai, own most of these companies except Starbucks, which Bill Ackman dumped lately, and I follow him a little bit, but it seems like there aren't currently super investors that own Starbucks, and that's one of my legacy positions, so I'm just leaving that on there, but I know it's a little bit overpriced at the moment. So I take my wish list and I compare it to the super investors that Dataroma has on its website and see what their activity has been like in my wish list of stocks I'd like to buy maybe. And even though it doesn't necessarily mean that much, I still need to do my own homework to see if these are really good companies that I'd like to buy on sale someday. But it helps to show some of the investor sentiment surrounding some of these companies and whether they're feeling more bearish or bullish on some of them. And looking at Berkshire Hathaway, I see that currently it's a little bit more on the bearish side, with 7 super investors selling it more so than 5 super investors buying it, or Starbucks with only 3 buying and 4 selling, or Costco with none buying and 1 selling. And lately in recent quarters, there's been a lot more reduction in Costco than adding to Costco positions, so that's also something to keep in mind. Or how Apple has also had mostly sells of 6 and only 1 buying, or with Visa, 6 super investors have bought it and 7 have sold it. And Alibaba actually has the most bullish super investors with 8 buying and 4 selling. So I feel like that's interesting to look at and think about how the wind might be blowing in the direction of some of these companies. Among my fantastic 4 favorite guru investors, I also create a sort of Venn diagram table of the stocks they mutually own, such as how 3 out of 4 of them seem to own Berkshire Hathaway, another 3 out of 4 own Bank of America, followed by, we know Charlie and Mohnish own Alibaba, while Mohnish and Guy own Seritage and Micron. So I think it's helpful to keep these in mind and see whether I would be interested in exploring these companies to see if I'm capable of understanding them, and maybe I'd like to also buy into some of these companies. Since I consider myself lucky, if I can buy positions in my favorite companies maybe once or twice a year, most of the time I'm just learning and studying and trying to be the best investor I can be, and also doing these YouTube videos because I want to really help others become the best investors they can be also. So I keep track of what Warren Buffett might be up to, and let's say I do a search for him in the Wall Street Journal and I see there's not all that much going on. I mean, Geico might be using some artificial intelligence, or Berkshire Hathaway is also doing some modular construction, and there's some articles from Berkshire's annual meeting back in May that was big news, and feel free to check out my video on that where I share a lot of the key highlights that I recap from that meeting. And then I also do a Google search, and I notice there's not that much Buffett's up to in those results either. So even though he said back in the annual meeting that considering we're at low interest rates and that there's been a lot of fiscal and monetary stimulus, he doesn't think the market is that overvalued. But the irony is I don't see him buying that much if he thinks that it's really not that overvalued. In other words, I think it's more important to pay attention to his actions than his words. While it's helpful to know what holdings companies or investment funds have of other companies' stocks via 13F filings that are shown on websites like Dataroma, I really wish there was an easy way to know how much of a stock buyback each individual company is also doing of its own stock, and if there was a way to compare and contrast that with the holdings of other companies that they're either buying and selling. And knowing this is also useful to me because I'd like to know if the intrinsic value is being improved or diminished by doing stock buybacks. And I tried to do a basic Google search to see if some website had conveniently gathered data about how much stock buybacks companies have done and how much outstanding shares there may be before and after, and at what price a company may have bought back its shares. But according to this question and answer in this Quora article, apparently it's hard to really know, and we have to go to the source of looking at companies' quarterly reports in their 10Q or go to their annual filings in their 10K to know what companies have been doing as far as buybacks. So if anyone knows of any good sites to see the extent of company buybacks and useful stats on that, I'd love to hear about it. And otherwise, I guess we'll just have to go to the source, or we can also hear about it from articles like from CNBC that says that Berkshire Hathaway has done plenty of buybacks in 2020 and they're continuing to do it in 2021. But I'm curious to see if they'll do as much buybacks as they did last year. And I like how this Guru Focus article, even though it's a little bit outdated, explains the merits of stock buybacks and how in the case of Berkshire Hathaway circa 2013, how the author believed that when it did buybacks of its stock, that buying back $1 worth of stock was equal to likely returning to shareholders a value of $1.25 in reducing the shares outstanding of Berkshire Hathaway. As opposed to if Berkshire would have given a dividend, then maybe after taxes, that would only be equal to 85 cents if Berkshire was paying out $1 in the form of dividends. And I think that it speaks a lot to Buffett's recent activity in that last year, he repurchased the equivalent of 80,998 A shares in the amount of $24.7 billion. And I also want to read you this important thing that Buffett has to say about buybacks, in that in no way do we think that Berkshire shares should be repurchased at simply any price. I emphasize that point because American CEOs have an embarrassing record of devoting more company funds to repurchases when prices have risen than when they have tanked. Our approach is exactly the reverse. So I think for Buffett to come out and say that in the 2020 annual letter that came out in winter 2021 speaks a lot to how Buffett doesn't just do buybacks lightly. He puts a lot of thought into it when he thinks that there's probably not a lot of other good opportunities to buy other things right now, and the best thing he could think of buying lately was his own company. So he's treating share repurchases very seriously and only does them when he thinks that the intrinsic value is higher than the current market price of Berkshire Hathaway. And just to make sure I haven't missed anything else, I do a quick Google search on Charlie Munger and see that mostly he's just been up to buying Alibaba, and the same with Mohnish Pabrai in those set of Google search results. But also, I think back to looking into YouTube and Googling what Mohnish has been up to with Alibaba to see if I can learn more. And in scrolling down some of the YouTube results, I see that he's had a London Business School interview with MBA students, and I'd like to listen to what that's all about so I can deepen my understanding of Alibaba's competitive advantages and risks. And I also noticed that I'm among the results in this YouTube search, so that's kind of funny. And then I also think about what has been going on with Alibaba lately. So I do a Google search on that and see that it's had a little bit of a data leak in its Taobao shopping website. And I should want to know how much that may be affecting its mode or not. And either way, like Mohnish Pabrai has done in advocating for shameless cloning, heads I win and tails I don't lose much. Finally, some other ways I can be in the know of what these investors might be up to include checking out Mohnish Pabrai's Twitter feed, as well as Guy Spier's Twitter feed, or also Guy Spier's 2 Instagram accounts, which kind of makes me wonder, why does Guy Spier have 2 Instagram accounts? But anyway, it's helpful to see what these guys are up to, and I sort of wish that Buffett and Munger had Twitter feeds, or Instagrams. Imagine if they had any kind of social media. I think that'd be hilarious. There would probably be pictures of burgers and ice cream, and it'd be kind of just funny seeing what things Buffett or Munger might post, which I know they never would, but still be kind of cool. And in any event, I hope this video was helpful to you in the process of how I try to keep tabs on what some of my favorite investors and stocks are up to, and how I try to gain as much knowledge as I can so that I can make informed investment decisions. And I hope you'll also be able to do the same. And if you enjoyed this video or learned something, please like and subscribe, and I wish you well on your journey to becoming the best investor you can be. Till next time.